Hello everybody, Mike Killer 44 here, and I'm wearing this mask for the occasion. Today, we're talking about top 10 scary movies, top 10 most scary movies. Now I know I said I'm gonna upload a video where I'm talking about my top 10 favorite Skeleton bands. I don't feel like doing that right now, because, just what Matthew said, you know, Matthew is, wouldn't really sit through a video of me talking about that. Here we go. So I'm getting this from IGN, okay? So this is not my list. Just to clarify that. Coming in number 10 is Night of the Living Dead, 1968. 1968. Director George Romero took the frightening idea of zombification, which up until that point had been regulated to creepy voodoo tales and extra-dimensional Lovecraft iron lore, and created a terrifying new genre of horror, the zombie apocalypse film. They're coming to get you, Barbara. Came the first official. I'll be back of horror as poor Diaz as to please a cemetery because the dead had inexplicably come back to life and started walking the earth in search of human flesh. Hitchcock discovered with 1963 The Birds that the sheer terror of not knowing the reason behind the sweeping global outbreak of evil can be the most horrifying part of the entire story. The zombie apocalypse genre is so enduring that it's still going strong today. Hello, Walking Dead fans. Sure, some films have made their zombies run fast and try to explain the whole dead alive deal, the virus, and that's all fine, but nothing will ever beat the basics. With this one film, Romero was able to tap into everything. Into everything we're afraid of. Death, desecration of the flesh, cannibalism, brainwashing, disease, and hopelessness. There's also a stinging underlying social message about racism, media, and paranoia, where viewers get to learn that they could be just as dangerous and cruel as the mindless hordes of undead they were hiding from. I hope you can hear me. Load. Okay. Coming in at number 9 is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre of 1974. Let your films bleak, bloody, and full of brutality. Tobe Hooper's gruesome indie 1974 flick took the nefarious inbreed mountain folk that we all cringe at in 1972 Deliverance and turned them into an aggressively insane backwoods clan of cannibals. Take a van full of young adults on their way to, I don't know what just happened. Are you Take a van full of young adults on their way to, I don't know, smoke weed and hang out in a cemetery, and let them run out of gas in the wrong part of Texas. Then throw them in the skin, salted Leatherface, and some meat hooks, and you've got yourself a film that barely found a distributor because of its extreme levels of graphic violence. Coming in at number 8 is Rosemary's Baby. Get over Mia Farrow's bad haircut and watch this movie. You'll be surprised how much this unsettling creep show from 1968 gets away with for, being in 1968. Roman Polanski's most controversial film outside of Chinatown is one of the best, telling the slow burn story of a young New York couple who move into an apartment building, which happens to be home to several Satan worshippers who went to use Rosemary's spawn as a means for Mr. Devil, Nick Brimstone, to return to our moral realm. Farrow is the perfect role of Rosemary's, as she slowly unreveals the more she discovers what shady cult dwellings dealings are happening all around her. The entire world seems to be conspiring against the most innocent of people here, as the devil watches from the wings and Rosemary breaks down. Coming at number 7 is Bride of Frankenstein. I'm going to stop right on my head. Certainly there were those of us on the ING staff who argued that this James Whale classic should have been higher on our list. Perhaps even number 1, but Comprise being what it is, Whale, Colin Clive, Boris Karloff, and the rest have had to settle for slot 7. This film is the apex of the universal cycle of classic monster pictures. Oh, man. Monster pictures in terms of quality, rather than simply regulating a cheap variation on the first Frankenstein, which is basically what many of the Universal sequels would go on to do, while Whale opted to, flesh out the story and characteristics of the original, which he also directed. Karloff, in his second turn as the monster, granted his most famous creation, the gift of speech here, and friendship, and even love. Also of humor, Bride of Frankenstein is a comedy as much as it is a horror film. Coming in at number 6, here's Johnny, The Shining. Red Rum, the famous elevator scene, where blood is coming out of. And in case you don't know what Red Rum is, it's murder spelled backwards. The Shining might just be Stephen King's most popular horror novel. Stanley Kubrick's movie adaptation, and almost certainly the most popular Stephen King film. The project was usually commercially focused on for Kubrick, but the same stylistic elements that defined his earlier films were on full display, and the film remains a haunting and unsettling, chronicle of a family man's psychological breakdown when he enters a hotel. In case you didn't know, this film is actually based on a true story. Yeah, or book, basically. Jack Nicholson plays Jack Torrance in this adaptation. Torrance is a struggling writer who accepts a job as a writer caretaker for the Overlook Hotel in the Colorado Mountains. This knowledge that the previous caretaker had gone insane and murdered his family fails to scare Jack away. But when both Jack and his psychically attuned son begin communicating with the many spirits haunting the Overlook, things quickly take a turn for the worst. Deadly hedge mazes, elevators full of blood, and the terrifying room 237 are only some of the horrors that await viewers. Aside from being a genuinely scary film, The Shining has left its mark on modern pop culture. Who doesn't recognize the image of Nicholson poking his head through a doorway and shouting, "Here's Johnny!" The Shining also served as a fodder for one of the best Treehouse of Horror segments in the history of The Simpsons. The film is required viewing for any horror aficionado. Just don't expect to sleep easily that night when you watch the film. Make sure your doors are open or closed. Axe proof. Make sure you don't have any elevators with blood coming out of them, and you'll be safe to go. You'll be able to sleep at night. Number 5 is Silence of the Lambs. Using a serial killer cannibal who, with a doctorate to help catch another serial killer, is a bare bones as you can get with this Best Picture Oscar winner. But the movie is much more than that. It is the scariest movie ever made, built around a psychological and with both used as a crime-solving tools and murder weapons. Yes, blame this movie all you want for your friend's bad Hannibal Lecter impersonation. That never seems to get better. But it gave us one of the screen's all-time iconic villains, and Anthony Hopkins, the role of his career. Number 4 is Alien. Let me get this straight. Aliens don't exist. Alien movies are generally thought of as being planted in the science fiction realm. However, with one of the original, at least, Alien was as much as a horror film as a sci-fi one, with a small cast being haunted by a lone, terrifying creature. Alien was a long way removed from the Star Wars and Star Trek of Hollywood. Alien is set several centuries in the future with when humanity has ventured into the stars. The crew of the mining vessel, what did I say? Nostromo became unwitting host to a bloodthirsty alien lifeform. And by one they fall to an enemy that hides in the shadows and springs from above. Only Ripley, not even going to try to say that name, is savvy enough to survive the aliens' onslaught. Too bad for her, it was the only first round. Number 3. Dun dun. Dun dun. Dun 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 dun. Is Jaws. The first blockbuster ever and the scariest movie, maybe even the best one, Spielberg's ever made. Jaws is equal parts monster movie and character piece, centered on an island called Amity that's preyed upon by something that leaves teeth the size of shot glasses in the hulls of boats and turns their owners into decapitated flotsam. I don't know. That was gross. What I just did there. I'm like, that was weird. The late Roy Scheider gives a career-defining performance as Chief Brody, the local sheriff with a fear of water, who was put in charge of taking down, the murderous flesh. Number 2 is Psycho. I'm not even going to try to make the music because I can't. Psycho is both one of the greatest thrillers of all time and one of the greatest entries in Alfred Hitchcock's legendary resume. A true master of suspense and tension, Hitchcock crafted a memorable horror experience with a limited cast and even more limited budget. Like so many great horror movies, Psycho scares exceed its limited scale. Psycho is the story of crazy old Norman Bates and his even crazier mother. When a young woman on the run from the law arrives at the remote Bates Motel, she falls victim to a knife-wielding killer. Several more victims are claimed before the killer is brought to justice, and the true secret of the Bates family stands revealed. The content of Psycho isn't as shocking as it was way back in 1960. After all, girls get stabbed in the shower all the time in modern horror cinema. However, it's a testament to Hitchcock's skill as a director that Psycho remains a tense and nerve-wracking experience. The killer of Janet Leigh's character and the accompanying musical key is one of the most iconic scenes in Hollywood history. I think people are going to, I don't know, I want to take a shower days on end every day. I don't know. You might get stabbed in the shower. Coming in at number 1 is the girl that turns her head 360 degrees. Yes, if you guessed it, The Exorcist. Tubular Bells is the scariest music arrangement ever made. We hear it and we're the scaredy cat equivalent of Pavlov's dog. The Satan bells ring, and we tense up, screaming it all in contempt. More than once, and then cry ourselves to sleep, with one eye open. Sleep good tonight. The movie's premise, a little girl possessed by a demon. It's scary enough as words on paper. But when director William Friedkin does with it, aside from prove that he has a seriously strong or frightfully off constitution for this sort of stuff, it's treat that extraordinary of it all as if we're really happening next door to us. The scares come from a place based in faith, where heaven and hell are as real as your beliefs in them care to be. Faith, for all the documentation on the subject, it's tethered to intangible. It's not something science can define or strategize. The demon that comes from the Exorcist's interpretation of that idea is something more powerful than a Freddy or a Jason. Something that can't be shot or stabbed or detained. Before it can be attacked, let alone defeated, it has to be first believed in, as terrible and soul-threatening as this may be to the young priest and old priest charged with delivering the cinematic exorcism. Fathers Karras and Merrin spend the third act of the movie fighting back the devil for control of young Regan's soul. And in doing so, Karras, a man of waving faith throughout most of the movie, finally believes in the only true good he knows by sacrificing himself to save that little girl. So, that was the 10 most scary movies of all time. If you liked the video, you know what to do. If you like me, you know what to do. Subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all again next time.